Good morning, class. Today I will discuss about African literature. To start with, I will be presenting with you the learning objectives for this lesson. First, describe African literature. And second, identify representative texts and authors from Asia, North Africa, Europe, Latin America, and Africa. Let us start by identifying what Africa is. Geographically, Africa is the second largest continent at almost 12 million square miles. It houses a variety of ethnic groups, and there are more than 1,000 languages, which makes Africa a multicultural continent. One of its earliest civilization is that of Egypt, which was established more than 5,000 years ago. As it had different ethnic groups, it also has various religious systems, many of which are polytheistic, with, with a supreme god and other lesser gods and deities. With the onset of foreign trades and cultural exchanges, Christianity was brought to Ethiopia in the early 4th century, while Islam came to northern Africa in the early 7th century. This affected the outlook and perspectives of people in Africa. Now, what is African literature? Research results that Africans rarely use paper for literature and use oral techniques in telling stories. This is called orature. Now, unlike Western cultures that are associated with advanced forms of writing, African literature is oral in nature, meaning it has to be recited and even performed. Griots are African storytellers and phrasers who used oral techniques in telling stories. In Western Africa, the griot is a learned storyteller, poet, performer, and historian. Griots have been handing down their oral culture for over 4,000 years. Griots accompany their stories with music, and it takes much effort and training and a long time, several years, for them to familiarize themselves with the numerous traditional songs, rhythms, and melodies. There are features of traditional African storytelling. Traditional African storytelling is a unique experience, and these are characterized by the following. First, it is a communal experience. Everybody belonging to traditional African societies take part in storytelling. Next, repetition is an important part of the storytelling. The storyteller may repeat stanzas, words, or phrases, and the audience may repeat those words back to the storyteller as well when doing call and response. Another characteristic would be storytelling fulfills purposes beyond being just a form of entertainment. It is a way for Africans to enrich their culture as well as pass it on. And finally, tone is a vital part of the storytelling. As such, the way the speaker says a word or statement affects its meaning. How something is said is just as important, if not more, as what is said when doing traditional African storytelling. The development of African literature, from its oral tradition up to the current trends, reflect the history of its people, the continent's feelings, and the minds of its population. Having been denied sharing their unique culture to the rest of the world, African literature takes pride in their identity as people along with their rich heritage. Being known as the Dark Continent, it enjoys a vast collection of masterpieces, both in oral and written literature, which are highly diverse and at the same time common. Now, the writings on Africa started in the Middle Ages when Arabic was introduced to them, and it moves forward in the 1800s with the coming of the alphabet. With the birth of the Negritos, which is literally means blackness, movement in 1934, African writers committed to look into their own culture, traditions, and values that can be applied in the modern world. The drive of the writers to write and excite political freedom grew, and the dignity of African traditions has been asserted. The Negritos or the Negritude movement opened the avenue for writers to celebrate what is truly African. So here are the famous writers in African literature. Though these African writers um, wrote in European language, they nevertheless embodied the spirit of nationalism. So strong and effective were their works that they gained worldwide acclaim. The characteristics of African literature include slave narrative, protests against colonization, and calls for independence. So, in the aftermath of the colonial experience, African writers have since chronicled new challenges that have emerged in their respective societies. New sovereign governments may have been installed, but their own problems cause writers to react. This is evident in the case of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who was imprisoned for a play considered to have subversive messages against the Kenyan administration of the time. Corruption in society is a long-standing theme of the African writers in the post-colonial times. It was reflected in V.Y. Mudimbe's Before the Birth of the Moon in 1989. So even before the colonizers arrived in Africa and indelibly shaped the continent's identity, local traditions were already flourishing in terms of cultural wealth. The following selections, both belonging to the myth genre, attest to the power of the motherland's literary tradition that had its roots in ancient times. Now, for your test, I want you to compare these two African myths to Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Consider how the storytelling evolved from the myths of the ancient times to the stories of the modern scene. Analyze the structure, plot, and underlying purpose of the narratives. So that's all. Thank you for today.